Good morning, students. And this is the other time where we're preparing ourselves for exams. And this is first additional language teaching foundation phase module, the one that you call FLT3701. And I'm your lecturer, Miss Margaret Ramokgopa. And these are my details. 012-429-6277 if you have any query. And that is my email address, ramokmm@unisa.co.za. And let's look at this module FLT3701. It has outcomes. All the modules have outcomes. I've just started with the outcomes. You will see that the outcomes of this module are related to the units. Outcome 1 reads that's policy guidelines for teaching and learning FAL in South Africa. That's the outcome is expected you to go through. Outcome 2, in-depth understanding and facilitation of language skills in the foundation phase classroom. Outcome 3 reads thus understanding and interpretation of the second language policies. That's what you have learned. Outcome 4, you have learned about understanding, applying the language theories on language teaching and learning. On outcome 5, which is unit 5, you've learned about language skills by using different strategies and methodologies. Outcome 6, you learned about to design and implement appropriate assessment tools in assessing and language. Just what happened here? Yes, levels of language development. Sorry about that, but let's go on. Now, this module, let me tell you, this module is an invigilator app module that you must remember. The exam will be on the 8th of November, 2022. It's an online examination. But I want you to remember about the invigilator app. Your script, examination script, will be having an OR access code, QR access code. Remember, this is an invigilator app module. I'm going to stress it right through. You will be penalized if you don't upload on the invigilator app, if you don't register on the invigilator app. Please register on the invigilator app. Okay. We said it that unit 1 was looking at that, and these are unit 1 outcomes. It says that after studying this unit, you'll be able to follow policy guidelines. Is very important because you are teachers. You'll be able to teach and be able to teach a FAL lesson, implement teaching and learning of FAL in the foundation phase, address different contexts of FAL teaching. That's unit 1, which has to do with those outcomes. But above all, facilitate teaching and learning of FAL as a precursor for medium of instruction. Have an understanding of what that means. Why you have to teach FAL. Why is it important to teach English as FAL, especially at schools where mother tongue is a language of teaching and learning. Let's say it's an African school where Sepedi is taught, or Setswana is taught, or Afrikaans is taught as a home language. So English will be your FAL. And it's important to understand why they say it's a precursor. It's preparing them for grade 4, because in grade 4, all the subjects are taught in English. So it's very, very important module, and it's a very important language that we must teach at foundation phase. In unit 1, you're also taken through on how to develop and apply vocabulary for FAL teaching. Okay, I think you remember that. You did that. Assignments. Now, in unit 1, you also learned about guiding principles for teaching FAL. And these are the guiding principles. Why these guiding principles? A question might come and say, why is it important for teachers to introduce language gradually and make learning as fun as possible? One of the guiding principles, it says you must teach language gradually, because FAL is not necessarily the learner's home language. And this is what I've just said. For instance, in grade R or 1, the learners might be learning a language for the first time. They never had the language before, hence that is important. Do not stress. They don't understand the spoken and written of that language. But what are the implications? If you not understand and you're not going through the guiding principles, learners may become anxious, show resistance to learning the new language. That is very key. Please remember, you want them to acquire the language. The other guiding principles is this one. I've given it as a question. Identify and describe types of teaching approaches that teachers should use to teach a file. It should be approaches that allow interactive learning, simple processes that allow conversational and responsive teaching styles, and activities that would allow for a maximum communication and learner responses during the lesson. This is very important. It's one of the guiding principles. But remember, learning activities should be kept more oral and practical to promote communication. Remember, little ones, when they learn a language, you speak to them. This is mother, this is mama, and they listen to the oral language and they repeat what you said. So if it's their new language, they don't know it. This is where you're going to start with the oral part. Okay. We also learned about language skills. These are very key. Listening has to be well developed. Speaking has to be well developed. Reading has to be well developed, and writing. And we say, these are the skills that will help you to acquire the language. Now, in listening, you learned about simple listening, discriminative listening, interpretative listening, creative and critical listening. Read more about them and understand what they are. And the speaking, we taught you about strategies. We taught you about the importance of role play, the importance of conversations and dialogues. And in reading, we taught you about incidental reading, advantages of that, and how it enhances reading skills. Shared reading, what it is. Group and guided reading, what is it? Paired reading, each and every of these reading skills, approaches, they work for certain areas, certain situations. When do you do shared reading? When do you do a group guided reading? At which level? That is very important. The other key thing is that selecting text. When you select a reading module, there are certain things that you need to look for, and you know them. And they must be appropriate for a particular grade. There is writing, which has to do with shared writing, interactive writing, guided reading, independent reading. You need to understand all this. This is what you are as a teacher, to go out there as you teach and to understand how all these are developed and how all these are being used, these approaches and strategies for different language skills. And the other thing that we learned that is in Unit 4 and 5 is understanding and applying language theories to teaching and learning and its implications. Hey, let me tell you, there is a theory. We learned about theories. A theory, what is it? It's an idea. Approach, it's how to deal with approach or the idea. We need to remember that. These are the approaches. Methodology, method or process used to implement the idea or the theory. I want you to understand the difference between the three. A theory, an approach, and a methodology. They talk to each other. Here's an idea. How do I deal with that idea? which is an approach. And here's a method. Which method can apply towards this idea? Which method can apply towards this theory? That is key, and you need to understand. Ask yourself those questions. Okay, we have crushing. These are the theories of crushing. You learned about them: acquisition learning, the monitor, the natural order, the input, and affective filler. As you read them, acquisition, they're self-explanatory. You acquire language by communicating. Monitor, you monitor your errors. Natural order, you can't just start up there. You know where to start when you teach. You know where to start when you teach a learner to pronounce or to have vocabulary of words before they can know the other structures that are related to language. You know the patterns of learning. The input is acquisition than learning. Now the input talks about the teacher as the input, as the key, and the teacher using different kinds of strategies, like using the body language. How did you teach that language? How are you helping them to acquire that language? And then affective filler, affective. How do you motivate them? How do you encourage that attitude? That they shouldn't have a negative attitude. It's important, remember those guiding principles. How do we enhance and strengthen self-confidence? And how do we help them not to be so anxious? That is very important. So as a teacher, we must remember that. We have another theorist, it's Camis. Camis talks about cognitive versus behavioral theories. And when we look at Camis theories, it's BICS and CALP, you know about them. BICS is basic interpersonal communication skills, and CALP will be cognitive academic proficiency. All this are self-explanatory. But when you look at BICS, it does not guarantee proficiency for the language, but language is taught through social situations at home. I can learn Zulu even if I'm not Zulu speaking because of the social connections that I have, the neighbors or at home. But that doesn't guarantee proficiency of the language for academic purposes. I can speak the language, but I might not be able to write. I might not be able to argue when I write in that language. And I might not be able to critically and creatively respond to arguments and debates in that language. I might even not know the scientific grammar of that language. So that is very important to understand. Cognitive academic language proficiency, which is CALP. This one is the language that is taught at school. On proficiency in a language for academic purposes, include the ability to listen and understand, to speak the language, to read it, and to write it. And this is learned formally in the classroom. BICS socially, CALP formally. Now, as Camis goes through, it talks about common and separate underlying proficiency. That's CAP. You need to understand what it means. And SUP, CAP means common underlying proficiencies. And SUP would mean separate underlying proficiencies. Now, what are those common things? As I said that, you know, these terminologies, they're self-explanatory. Camis believes that learners who are bilingual can help others learn. And she also believes that home language help learners to gain knowledge of another language because of what structures, because of strategies that you have used to teach them the language. And sometimes you find that some languages, they have commonalities, they have similarities, and it helps the child to learn or the learner to learn the second language. But when you look at the SUP, which is separate, We can learn about the difference between the language. Like, for instance, you look at the African language, the way we pronounce, and the English, we don't pronounce the same. So we need to understand that for pronunciation, look at English versus African languages. That is key. So he says, Kami says, understand language where there are commonalities and where there are differences. Now, this theory of Kami's of second language, I've given you a question. They say Kami's believed in the following two aspects. Now I gave you a question. I say, describe the difference between cognitive and behavioral acquisition. Cognitive, which involves understanding. Behavioral, which refers to habits. Now, beliefs of cognitive beliefs that understanding plays a bigger role. Learners need to be taught to understand FAL on how FAL works rather than developing habits which will assist them. Have that understanding of the cognitive and behavioral acquisition. Acquisition means to acquire the language. Behaviorally can go to creating an encouraging environment. Classroom must be conducive for paying attention. How do you create a conducive classroom? That is key also, especially when you talk about language. BICS versus CALP in learning additional language. But I've put this within the other theories of crushing. It says issues of motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. Let's look at them. Crushing's affective filler hypothesis deals with learners. Affective. It has to deal with their attitudes. It has to deal with their motivation. It has to deal with self-confidence and anxiety towards learning of FAL. Now, that note is very important. This hypothesis becomes a problem when learners only experience a language in terms of CALP, not BICS. Do you see how we have connected both the Kamis and the crushing theories? What is CALP and what is BICS? It says that this hypothesis becomes a problem when learners only experience the language in terms of CALP, because it will affect their attitude and not be meaning that if learners do not use the language socially, they see it as strictly school subject with no fun attached. That doesn't mean that when you teach them language, you shouldn't create a fun environment. That language must also be learned socially. It is important to know that when language is acquired through BICS, makes learners more willing. It addresses attitude, it addresses motivation, it addresses self-confidence, and it lessens and removes anxiety. They experience the process as a way of socializing. Therefore, it is important then for teachers to create a classroom environment which caters for both social and academic. Self-confidence and anxiety, teachers need to structure lessons that involve learners without making them self-conscious. Use other learners as this to help the others or to assist. This will reduce anxiety. Preparing a fun lesson. Teacher need to keep BICS and CALP ideas in mind. Teaching and learning an additional language must be centered on CALP. You know what CALP is now. Pay attention to natural order hypothesis. You can't start there with language grammar before they can even pronounce. That's what it means. This will allow the teacher to scaffold which order of approach of component and language to follow. Build up information from the easiest to the most difficult. That's the natural order. Informal assessment can focus on BICS where you just ask them to talk to you during formal assessment. Formal assessment focus on CALP and use the monitor hypothesis. You are correcting, you are helping the learners to correct their mistakes. Now, what is common on both sides is the input hypothesis, that you as the teacher recognizes that the teacher play a central role in the foundation phase. You are the input. They are the ones who impact biggest amount of you as the teacher. They don't teach themselves. You are the one who impart the biggest amount of knowledge. The teacher also play a role with affective field hypothesis, as they can help to motivate learners, build their self-confidence, and remove anxiety. How beautiful that it is that we have interacted, we have helped the learners, we have motivated them. But look at these theories, the way we have used both of them together. The BICS, the CALP, but also the theories of canis, theories of Krashen, I mean to say. Now, I want us to look at this. Unit 5, teaching language using different strategies. Teaching is based on different strategies, methodologies, and approaches. You need to remember that. If you go down there, it says they help to explain and understand how learners acquire these strategies. Most methods and approaches can be used together or one of the following. You remember what we said about strategies earlier on. Teachers use different approaches according to classroom context. Context is key, remember, where you are. Context of the environment, context of the classroom. Due to so much diversity in schools with regards to the following, for example, age, socio-economic backgrounds, and other conditions found in schools, that is the context. Note, classroom situation will differ much from school to school. You are the one who must identify the situation. Consider, according to Van der Waals events, consider methods to be restrictive with rigid procedures favored by supporters of. Now they say methods are very rigid. So you must be able to use these methods interchangeably. Don't be rigid. Somewhere they work, somewhere they don't work because of context. And it says methods are more formal as they are controlled by rules. So you need to be careful of that because of your context. But remember, approaches are supported by theory and are flexible. So be flexible in your classroom. Even if they have said this strategy works A, B, C, D like that, look at the strategy if it's working in your classroom. Because of context. These are the oldest methods that were used for teaching file, grammar translation method. It pays attention to grammar rules so that there were no errors, and teacher played a central role. And the second one is direct method, learned by listening to spoken language, often communicated with pictures and actions. And there is the one says natural approach, exposed to learners using visual literacies until they were ready to speak. These were the oldest methods that were used, but we have discussed them in the study guide. Let's look at this. Audiolingual method. I want you to understand audiolingual method. What is it based on? It is based on behavioral psychology. Audio means speaking. Listening, I mean to say. Lingual means speaking. And it's focused on learners. According to Paduri and Imbata, this method uses drilling and repetition of various aspects of language, such as vocabulary. So you need to understand this method. Learners may spend much time listening because there is a lot of listening. It's about listening and speaking. And according to Van der Waalt, 2009, this method used synonyms to teach new words. For instance, learners repeat dialogues. That's where they learn about dialogue. They do dialogues. They correct grammar. After a few repetitions, teachers use synonyms to expand on vocabulary. Learners complete sentences and rephrase sentences in a shorter way. Please remember, it is often believed that this method is a good way to start teaching IFAL in the foundation phase. We did indicate in the guiding principles, give them a lot of oral. Let them listen and repeat what you say. Okay, audiolingual goes on. But the problem is that this method is not communicative. For instance, it has its own advantages and disadvantages. Learners learn much information, but are always able to use it to actually communicate with others. The method is analytical, yet does not teach actual rules. So you need to know the pros and cons. The question might say, what are the pros and cons of audiolingual? And let's hear what Mbata Impaturi is saying. She's saying that this method works well if learners are able to compare the additional language to the home language in order to understand the similarities and differences. So as teachers, you must take note that you must ensure that learners do not transfer errors they make in home language to the FAL. They must know those similarities and differences. And she goes on and says, teachers, repetition without understanding, please avoid that repetition. Because this method believes that repetition, it teaches repetition without understanding. Language is not used naturally with enjoyment. Repetition can also be boring. Too much repetition teaches repetition. Be aware of the pros and cons. But we spoke about CTL, communicative language approach. On communicative language approach, it is more about functions of language, the forms, the structure, the grammar. The approach teaches and uses BICS as a starting point. To learn how to use a dialogue, learners play as a central role and has much to do with learners' personal experience. Context, where they're coming from, let them not have anxiety. Grammar plays a smaller role because the main focus is making learners and others listen to what they say and not necessarily how we say it. It's just understanding what they're saying, but not how we say it. Now, communicative language teaching approach, teachers do play a role as they act as a go-between. For example, they ensure that when learners communicate, they actually understand the meaning of what the learner says to another. It's important, at least the meaning. Teachers design activities and choose text. Teachers need to pay attention. This is where you are involved as a teacher. Teachers need to create the right environment. The atmosphere in the classroom should not be too formal. Learners should feel that they can learn from their mistakes. Learners need to feel independent enough to learn at their own pace. That is affective failure hypothesis. However, Van der Waals mentions that this approach is only effective in smaller groups. There is another approach that you learned about, task-based language teaching approach. This approach is centered on learners as it uses language which feels natural to them. And context is personalized and relevant to learners' lives. But according to our different writers, Mbata and Paturi, scholars, suggest that task is learners' understanding of how to work and interact in additional language, so as to transfer meaning rather than focusing on grammar. So that task, it's important for the learner to understand how to work and interact in an additional language. So that task is important, task-based. The approach entails that lessons are designed and the tasks as the objective. Are the learners able to follow the task? 3 task activities can be given. Main tasks, which provide instructions, following up the task and paying attention. You can't just give one task and say, these learners, they can't do it. You can't. You have to follow this task based according to these 3 sections. And they understand the task. Okay. There is another one, total physical response. Where do you use it? In grade 4, in grade 5, grade 3? Physical aspect involves both memory and physical movement. Learners listen to orders and carry them. Doing them physically. The approach can be fun as learners play the game when learning the verbs and the words and sentences. But according to Van der Waals et al. 2009, is that the approach has positive aspects such as learners are actively involved as actions are connected to muscles, memory, and the approach works according to steps. For example, the teacher explains the language, show the actions which learners are expected to do. Learners listen carefully and only speak when they feel ready to do so. But let's look at this. Total physical response approach follow the natural order hypothesis. Please understand these approaches. Usually we use it in grade 1. When they're in grade 3, if they have acquired the language, why? It's used when the language is new. The approach makes it easier to acquire language as the words are used. Doing actions reflects. Vocabulary is used and taught within the context which allow learners to understand more easily. It has its own disadvantages, as we have seen the advantages. It's boring with actions. Sometimes learners don't pay attention to the sounds and words. Weak learners tend to copy the others without understanding, and they won't acquire the language. So it is effective for smaller groups for control of actions. Okay, there is bilingual approach and code switching approach. And bilingual approach is supported by Kami's theory that additional language can be acquired through transferring or translating knowledge of words, language structures from home language to the new language. However, Krashen criticized this approach, says that if the view, he is of the view that if the language is learned on its own, the learner gains more knowledge. I don't know what you're saying, but this is what Krashen says. Okay, so bilingual, it's a second language, but Kamis supports it, that you can learn the second language by transferring and translating knowledge of words. And there is code switching. Refers to speakers who change from one language to the other. Changes either within the same sentence or within the sentences. And she says that This code switching is related to CALP, where you're looking at commonalities. Okay. You need to understand that. Okay. Unit 6, you learned about approaches, reading approaches. Please understand what reading approaches are. There is what we call the whole word approach, the phonic approach, the balance theory approach, and the language experience approach. Modeled reading, these are reading methods. There are methods, there are approaches. We have shared reading, modeled reading, we have guided reading, we have independent reading. Remember, whole word approach, phonic approach. Remember, reading methods, shared reading. Okay, you need to understand the difference between reading methods and reading approaches. We are writing on the 8th of November, 2022. And it's a year module. It counts 100 marks. And we'll be writing online. There will be 4 questions in the examination paper. No multiple choice questions. There won't be any matching questions. There won't be any true-false questions. There will only be short essays. Let me just verify that. No multiple questions. No questions with matching, no true and false questions. But remember, questions may have 2 parts. These short essay questions, they may have 2 parts. They're expecting you, like for instance, this one says, describe the difference between a method and approach and give an example for each. Remember, it says describe the 2-part, the difference between a method and approach. You must understand what it means to describe. You must know what is a method, you must know what is an approach. And all questions in the question paper are compulsory. Let me just come to this. Your module is a level 7 module. And when we develop assessments, we use the Bloom taxonomy. There is different levels. There's knowledge, comprehensive, application, analysis, synthesis. With comprehensive, you show understanding. Question will say discuss. Application questions will say interpret. Apply, what do you think? Analysis, it's a debate, compare and contrast. Synthesis will say create, and evaluation. You select, you judge, you decide, you predict, you justify. Have an understanding of this because your question paper is based on that. Let me tell you, I said our module is a NQF level 7. Look at this yellow part, NQF level 7. You remember those Bloom's taxonomy that I was reading, those levels? Remembering and understanding. The question paper has only 10 marks of those questions. Level 3, which is applying an application, is 40. And level 5, which is evaluating, it's 50. 3 and 4, those questions, they amount to 40. And if you look at this on the right-hand side, how do I remove it? When you look at this on the right-hand side, it's 10, 40, 50. Level 1 and 2, you only get 10 points. Level 3 and 4, it's 40. Weight. Level 5 and 6, the weighting is 50. Remember. And we also get questions that says, students saying that, ma'am, is it an open test? Is it an open book test? Let me tell you, if your question is on level 5, it will never be an open test question. You will go to the book. You will try and find the question. It wants you to apply your mind. It says evaluate, analysis. Go back to those and understand. You'll be wasting your time trying to look for answers. And I've given you a lot of terminologies. When the question says analyze, what does it mean? Try to understand. Give a detailed description. Describe. Give a detailed account. Discuss. Examine important aspects of, argue all sides before drawing a conclusion. Go through all this and understand these terminologies because they relate to different levels. You are level 7. Yours is one of the highest levels. Okay, assessment 2 questions. You were expected to explain and discuss why you think language skills develop the child's ability to acquire second. These are some of the questions, but why I'm saying this, I've underlined what are the key here. Explain and discuss. Do I understand what explain and discuss mean? What must I discuss? Why I think language skills. You need to know those. Why I think language skills. Those are keys for them. The other question read thus was, describe how the use of the following strategies can enhance reading. Do I understand what describe means? I must know what phonological awareness is and how this enhances reading. I need to know how it enhances reading. I must describe what frame of reference is, how it enhances reading. I must explain and describe what images and pictures are and how they enhance reading. The other question was, create a vocabulary development activity. Create. Level 5 and 6. How do I understand what it means? Do I understand what vocabulary development activities are? Do I understand levels of complexities across various grades? I need to understand that. Now, what is the level of grade 2? Do I understand what skills development is? And this skills development, when you write, must relate to language. Resources that relate to teaching of language. Your discussion must relate to the teaching of language. Don't write skills development of saying, I don't know. They will know the good burying. You like to say when you give maybe a theme on vegetables, on food, and then you will say skills developed. You say food that builds our body. I want you to talk about language. Skills that build our body is health. I want you to talk about aspects of language, even if your theme is vegetables or it's food. Case study will be there. Read the case study and answer the questions. Your questions must relate to the case study. Compare and contrast how language is used in audio language approach. You must understand what dialogue is in audio language, what dialogue is in communicative approach, and you compare the similarities, but also the difference, because it says compare and contrast. These are some of the questions. Read what the question is asking. Okay, now preparation for the exam. Please Invigilator app. Copying from each other, you'll be penalized. You might even plagiarism will be penalized. Guys, please, we don't want to go through that. I have more than 3,000, 4,000 students. And through the Invigilator app, you have to go through students. We have copied each other. Please be careful. Don't do that. Numbering questions is very important for the marker. You upload on Moodle correctly. Please upload. Learn how to upload. Follow the Invigilator app requests. Write neatly and clearly. This one, I'm repeating it. Please Use an examination pad if you are using your pen, ball pen and a paper to write. Please don't write on a page that doesn't have lines, because we can't even read what you have written. The lines goes from up and then they go down and skewed and all that. Please write eligibly. Read instructions with understanding. That's the other problem that we have. Respond to what the question wants without including other unnecessary elements. Look at the mark given. If it's 5 points, give me 5 reasons. Don't give me the half page of a book, of a page. Half page of what you have written. Some of the things are not even necessary. Read your work before you submit. See if it makes sense. Submit something that somebody, when they mark it, it will make sense. Read your work. Invigilator scanning is for verification only. You have to upload on Moodle. Don't come and say, no, I uploaded on Invigilator app. Activate my live account. Don't send an email through Gmail. Please, I won't respond to it. No one will respond to it. Use my live account. Read all the uploaded announcements from today. From next week, I'm going to upload announcements of what are the expectations. A day before you write, on the day you write, I'm going to upload announcements and also put them on my email. Please read announcements and messages for a smooth writing process. Okay. Invigilator app is very important. I've spoken about it. If you don't use it, there are consequences. What do you do when you encounter challenges? I'm going to send you an email on the announcements, who to contact. There's a support, a system that you can call on WhatsApp. You can send an email to them. They will help you. And you only submit your final script to your app. This academic dishonesty, I've spoken about it. Don't copy. There is a lot of academic dishonesty. You copy. A Invigilator app will show us, will tell us. Our markers will tell us that you have copied. These scripts are similar. A lot of students have been disqualified. They had to re-register or suspended. This is serious. And the other thing is copying from the guide and using it as a source and not referencing. Referencing is very key. The exam has 4 compulsory questions. And these are the 4 compulsory questions. And good luck with your exams. But as I say this, I know we're going through load shedding. It is your responsibility to check where you are if there is a load shedding by the time we're going to write exams. If there is load shedding, time to try to move to another place. It's your responsibility. We can't help it. The university can't help it. The only option that you will have, I don't know, is to write an agro-TET. But if you don't look for a convenient place, you're wasting your time. You write an agro-TET, you don't look for a convenient place because there will still be load shedding. You're wasting your time. You'll have to register for the module. It's your responsibility. Don't send me an email and say, I don't have electricity. Do your homework. Do your homework. Look for a place where it's conducive for you to read. Good luck with your exams. I wish you all the best. Looking forward to your marking. And rest as you study. Take care. No anxiety. Goodbye.